director for the Center of Appalachian Studies at University of Virginia's College at Wise. She hosts the Talking Appalachian podcast, which is great, by the way, based on the book by the same title. Clark's writing has appeared in the New York Times, Salon.com, Harvard University's press blog, Oxford American, and on NPR, among others. Clark has been a jewelry maker for several years, crafting from coal, book pages, and florals. You can find her shop, Ivy Attic Co., on Etsy. And while we're doing plugs, I would also like to remind everyone, first off, can we give a wonderful round of applause to our volunteers who have brought food, staffed everything, provided us with coffee, kept us with hot drinks. And second of all, I would remind you that we are the Guild, the Southern Highland Craft Guild, are a nonprofit, and we are shamelessly asking for donations. So, yes, we're happy to take those.
Thank
Everyone
you.
could give Amy a round of applause.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Can I just hold this?
Yeah.
Okay. I talk with my hands, so thank you for hanging around, and I'm grateful to be here and be part of this. I am from Central Appalachia. I'm from about 2 hours north in Wise County, Virginia. So I grew up there. I grew up in Lee County, Virginia, so I've spent a lot of time coming to Western North Carolina for various reasons. And I took some classes on silversmithing down here, and so it's just a beautiful place to be. But I'm talking today about something that's really sort of outside my area of expertise, because what I do at UVA Wise is my specialty is Appalachian dialects. And so I'm in discourse studies. I teach communication studies, and I teach Appalachian studies. And I focus on the dialects of the Appalachian region, which is what my podcast is about. And before I forget, I have flyers here, just information if you're interested in listening to the podcast. It tells you a little bit more about it. And you're going to see a photograph. It's called Daddy's Hands, taken by my friend Tim Cox, who's a photographer in Wise County. And every time I ship out a piece of coal jewelry, a postcard of Daddy's Hands goes with it, because now that I know how meaningful it is to the people that purchase it and wear it. So I started making jewelry in 2020 with my daughter. COVID, So we were sheltering in place for COVID, and I said, now's a good time for us to start this endeavor together. She was about 12 years old, and she's very artsy, and she was making things, and I thought, well, this is a good opportunity for the two of us to do something together. So I said, we'll start a little Etsy shop with the things that we're making. We're not going to make $1 million from this. It was just a good opportunity to do something together and teach her the elements of business. And I come from a family of makers. So down in Lee County, my parents were very young when I was born. So I had my great-grandmother in my life until my 30s. So I saw them sewing and quilting and crochet and food and woodworking. I mean, it was something all the time, and so it's kind of in our blood to just make things, and that's sort of how this got started. So the coal, I was actually making jewelry from book pages, discarded books and dictionaries, and making Appalachian word jewelry from that, and my daughter was painting glass, and my husband said one day, why don't you make jewelry from coal? Coal is really meaningful to people around here, and I bet it would be popular. And it hadn't even crossed my mind. It's something that you live around so much that you take it for granted, I guess. And I said, well, that's a good idea. Yeah, maybe I'll try that. So I did, and it sort of it took on a life of its own, and the researcher part of me and the maker part of me came together, because I started to analyze what people were saying about it when they messaged me and said, we'd like for you to make a piece for us, or when they would give me a review online, or they would reach out after they got it and say, this is what it means to me. So that's where all of this started. And when this conference came up on my Facebook feed, I was like, this is perfect. This is like the perfect place to talk about this. So let's talk a little bit about, do I just tap? Or do I click?
There's a clicker too. Oh yeah, once the clicker's engaged, it's the clicker.
I'm clicking.
It should be the two arrows.
I'm clicking.
Let me see. It might got cut off. Yeah, it's off. Hang on just a second.
Oh, it worked.
There we
I
go.
just tapped on the slide.
Perfect.
Okay. So just a little bit of context on coal, and it's important to know this because coal is a complex topic. As you probably know, coal is, you got to be careful how you talk about it, right? Especially in Wise County, you got to be careful how you talk about it. So anyway, I work with bituminous coal, and just a little bit of information about coal and what it is and its history. Just this is a very quick overview. It was formed 100 to 300 million years ago, when dead organic material, I can't see this fine print, was buried in peat bogs. Heat and pressure over time created the coal. Now, in the mid-1700s and 1800s, as you know, it was discovered in Appalachia, and coal prospectors were drawn from the north. I live in Big Stone Gap, so I live in a place called Poplar Hill. It's near the Southwest Virginia Museum, and it's where the coal prospectors built their big fancy houses. And so those Victorian homes are still up there around the Southwest Virginia Museum, and you can see the history of coal if you go there. Labor unions organize and coal companies retaliate. You know, coal companies back then in the early 20th century were not really ethical in their practices, and it was an unsafe job, and there wasn't a lot of compensation. If your husband died in the mines, you were put out of your house the next day, right? And so there were a lot of things that prompted the labor movement. So that resulted in gun battles and violence. You might know about the story of the Battle of Blair Mountain. Denise Giardina wrote a wonderful novel called Storming Heaven about the coal. Has anybody read Storming Heaven? And The Unquiet Earth is the sequel about the labor struggles in West Virginia. And then the mid-1900s to 21st century, mechanization causes the loss of jobs. Mountaintop removal becomes a topic of controversy. And of course, it's a boom and bust economy, and it's slowly been in decline over the years, and it's been a topic of politics, as you know. And so it's a complex thing. And that'll come back around here in just a minute. So where do I get my coal? So we live near a railroad track, and the coal trains still run occasionally, and the Powell River is just below it. So there's our house, the Powell River, and the railroad track, and the coal falls from the train into the river. And so what I had been doing before I started making coal jewelry was picking up river glass, because river glass is just beautiful when you crush it and you mix it in resin. It just makes really, really pretty jewelry. And so I was just doing the same thing with the coal. I was going down to the riverbanks and finding the coal and bringing it back up and smashing it and mixing it with resin. It really looks like onyx. It's got a beautiful finish when it's done. And these pictures that you see are pictures of my pieces. So I'll pick it up and I create these pieces. Now, hold on a minute. So the researcher in me is going to come out now, so this is going to start to sound fancy. So what meaning does it have? So I started with that question, and I teach rhetorical studies. I teach students how to break down messages and look at symbols and think about their meanings, and we always use a theoretical lens when we do that. Like it's a guiding, it's got a set of guidelines on how you look at things like this. So I use the interpretive approach. I'm a qualitative researcher, so I'm a non-statistical researcher. I do things like interview and oral history collection and artifact analysis. And so I started thinking about how the interpretive approach could be a way of looking at this, because the interpretive approach looks at how people make meaning and how they make meaning in their interaction with each other, but also in their interaction with objects. And so if we think about jewelry as an artifact, for example, and we think about what meaning it has beyond just being a fashion accessory, right? Especially with something as complicated as coal. That's where I started. And then I started thinking about power and power dynamics, and that led me to semiotics. Now, I've only ever used semiotics. I do gravestone research. So right now I'm involved in a research with a burial ground behind my grandmother's house. It was, the family folklore is that it was the burial ground of an enslaved community. And so I've been looking at the stones and using semiotics to read the stones. And so I applied that. When we think about a piece of jewelry as a signifier, then we ask ourselves what is signified when the coal, what is signified and what the coal symbolizes for the person wearing it. So this is not one of these studies that took a long time. What I have here is the basis for probably a good solid study, because it's anecdotes from what people have written to me and from the reviews that people have given me. So I collected those and looked at patterns in those anecdotes, and this is what I found. And this is copper. This is a copper hair fork with coal in the top as the sun. So I identified 4 categories of meaning. One is memory. People order the jewelry because they're grieving and they want something to remember the person that they're grieving. People may still be living, but what they did for a living mattered. Daddies and granddaddies especially, and they want to wear it for that reason. Place, what it means to be from Appalachia and what it means to be the descendant of a miner or having grown up in a coal camp. And power, the exploitation of coal companies and what that means. And that's the one that surprised me the most, that people would actually wear coal as a symbol of exploitation. This is probably one of the most powerful. There were actually 2 examples of this. One, and this is when I sent my proposal in for this conference, this is the story that I told on the proposal. A woman wrote to me and she said, we were digging my daddy's grave. He was a coal miner, and we hit a coal vein while digging the grave. And I scooped the coal out of the coal vein, and I would like for you to make jewelry from it for my family, because he meant so much to us. And I think I burst into tears when I saw that. And that made everything change for me as a maker, because I thought, when you're standing there and you're making those pieces with coal that came from someone's grave, that is that's really significant. That's really powerful. And then I made another memory piece for someone, and she wrote back after she got it. She wasn't expecting the copy of Daddy's hands that she got with the piece, and she said when she opened it, she sat in her driveway, and she said, I was actually talking with my dad who had passed away, and she said, I asked him to send me a sign because I was so depressed. And she said, it's like I talked to him still. And she opened the package and saw the Daddy's hands postcard. And so the memory pieces, that's a theme. That's a theme. And I haven't just done that with coal. I've done that with other things that people have sent me. But that's probably, for me as a maker, the most powerful. The second pattern that I identified was coal representing people. So it's a symbol of fathers, grandfathers, husbands, and women mind as well, but I've yet to make a piece to represent a woman. That's almost always the men in the family. But they tell me that signifies hard work, and I'm quoting words that came from the reviews and words that came from the messages. Hard work, dangerous work, sacrifice, someone I love, dinner buckets, thermos bottles, and carbide lights. That's almost a poem. It signifies a connection to place, which seems obvious, but people want to remember where they're from. And I get orders as far away as Alaska and Hawaii. When people leave Appalachia especially, or when they have family from Appalachia, this is something that they want as a reminder of place and what place means. And I think for me, that would be the most significant thing too. My dad was a coal miner for a while, and my grandfather was a coal miner for a while, but they didn't stay with it for very long. My dad worked in low coal, and he said he just got tired of having to crawl around all the time. So he went to work for the power company. But Appalachia as an identity is multi-layered and really significant, I think, for people. And it means different things for different people. It's sort of like when I talk about dialect and when I study dialects, vernacular dialects, even people from Appalachia have different opinions about that, you know? Some want to erase it because they don't want the stigma that comes with a vernacular dialect, and some embrace it proudly and dare you to say anything negative about it, right? Same thing goes with what place means to people. And then the exploitation of our region and our people. And the people who tell me this in the same breath will say, my family mined coal, and I love my family, but I can also see what coal did, you know, there's a story out of Wise County, and poems and songs have been written about it, but a little boy was killed, a 3-year-old was killed in his bed, in his trailer at night when a boulder tumbled down a mountainside, and it was dislodged from a blast, and it came from an illegal road that a coal company had built. And so he sort of became that symbol several years ago of what people fight for. They fight for the environment, they fight for the illnesses, they fight for the land that was taken away, and so that's yet another reason why of significance for this. So it's a paradox of power, because coal turns the lights on, right? That's the bumper sticker that you see all over Wise County. Coal keeps the lights on, and yet it also marginalized people in a lot of ways. So then that brought me to thinking about what it signifies for me as a maker, and I've touched on this a little bit already, but it certainly means more than making money, and it certainly means more. I don't consider myself this really important artist, because what I do it's not that hard. It's creative, and it feels good to do it. But now for me, number one, holding coal in my hands just fascinates me, because I love history, and to think about how old it is and to think about the process that it went through to be what it is phenomenal for me. So that in itself is one of the reasons that I do it. But since this has started happening, these patterns of the why, you know, why people want it and why people wear it, that's what gives it meaning, and that's why I keep doing it. My daughter sort of left me alone with the business after a while. She went on to something else. She's an athlete now, and she's not interested in making jewelry anymore, but I kept doing it for this reason, because it matters to people. It matters to people, and that means it matters to me. And that's a short and sweet version of my talk. Any questions? Thank you. Yes. Yes, I smash it. Sometimes I smash it. Sometimes I just leave it in solid pieces, because I do have settings that will allow for the solid pieces to go in. But I smash it up and I mix it in resin, and it becomes, sometimes people want the dusty look, and then sometimes people want just the solid black look. This is one of my rings. And it looks sort of like onyx. And that's really all I do. And I started silversmithing a couple of years ago, so now I'm making my own settings and filling them with coal. Yes? Oh, other people make it. I see some makers from West Virginia on Etsy, and they have some really beautiful pieces. So I know other people are doing it, but it's definitely a niche. It's not widespread. It's not, I'm not in which I think is one of the things that helps me out in terms of sales, because a lot of people aren't doing it. Yeah.
Have you ever considered in terms of the research side of what you're doing with, like talking with them and asking them about maybe the reactions they get from their customers as well? Or
That's a good idea. I had not.
of working with coal and
That's a good idea.
might have the same type of reasons that you do?
I had not considered it, but I will now. I'm at the very beginning of thinking about this way. You know, until this conference, it had been, I call it Ivy Attic Company because my studio is in my attic, and I literally like come home and take off my professor hat and I go in my attic and I get my hands dirty, and you know, you all know, it feels good to make stuff, and and to design it and things like that. So these two worlds are colliding now, and I hadn't thought about that, but I'm going to do that. It's a good idea. Yes?
That lovely piece that you showed that was a silver mountain filled with coal, was that one of the settings that you made recently?
I did not make that setting, but I have made the mountain settings. Yes.
That was lovely. I want to get
Thank you.
that. This is from Coal Country.
Yeah, thank you.
Got time for another question? Anybody has one?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.